whatever's going to work, I'm going to use. If the benefit is greater than the risk, which I was concerned about the risk, but at that point I took it. It was the only thing that worked, actually. It really, really helped. But I had to get kind of past a little bit of a fear of it.
What was the fear?
I couldn't go to sleep, and it just relaxed me enough. And I was actually very surprised at how well it worked. I was also nervous about getting up in the morning and making sure that I didn't.
That you might be, stoned. Legal cannabis market is going to be $102 billion by 2030. What was forbidden now is mainstream. So the argument was, well, yeah, let's protect young people, but let's allow adults to make their own decisions.
I'm not going to make it political, but the conversation of what is governance? What is the governance over people? Has governance gone too far?
I also have found myself in new conversations with friends who now have been microdosing, and that's even more intense than the cannabis, right? And we know that the pandemic sort of was such a stressful thing, and people were sort of caught in their 2x4 or whatever they were living. People had nowhere else to go. And one place to go someplace else,
be in your house,
was through some psychedelics, right?
Mm-hmm. The people who are trying it are other executives like me, are therapists. It actually creates this higher level of thinking.
I have a friend who tried shrooms. She's someone that keeps seeking to not be limited by her body to understand reality. And she will talk about how part of the experience was watching her hands just kind of feel like they're disintegrating. And I thought, well, that sounds really scary, or that sounds really mind-altering in a way that what's a productive aspect of it? But when I asked her about it, at least what I picked up from it was that it was very liberating for her to see that her selfness was not self-contained to the physical boundaries. So I leaned into it, and I see it differently now. Welcome to a new episode of Disrupt the Podcast with your co-hosts Andrés Tapia
and Eloiza Domingo,
where we challenge conventional thinking and we look at the new ways that are shaping our future.
Thanks for joining us for another episode today. And today we're going to be talking about the disruption of self-care, which actually, Andrés, I had to disrupt my self-care recently. I was... Full transparency, I had my period last week, and it was a rough one. And nothing was working. I was trying Motrin, all the things girls that we try, which is Motrin, and I had the pad on, and I took a hot bath or whatever. So my friend said, his mom uses THC and CBD gummies. And I was like, it's like this shock. And I said, what does she use it for? Is she on her period? And he said, no, she uses it to go to bed, to go to sleep. And he sent me a packet. Actually, he's up in Wisconsin. So he sent me a packet, and it was just the CBD. And CBD, is a derivative from cannabis, from marijuana. And I took it, and you know what? It worked. It was the only thing that worked, actually. And so it really, really helped. And so as we were kind of prepping for this and thinking about the different ways that we, care for ourselves, that we think about wellness, but especially in the age of kind of, trying new things. I've tried something new, and actually it really helped, but I had to get kind of past a little bit of a fear of it.
What was the fear?
THC and CBD, they're derivatives of cannabis, of marijuana. And so, I at least grew up with a lot of people doing marijuana around me, smoking joints and things like that. I've tried it, and I worried a lot. People worry about addiction, or what it might feel like or what it might look like, And so, but I think I realized more and more that, well, it works. It wasn't, it's in a very small dose, this thing. And I worried that it would become addictive, for me. But what I found is I used it, for 2 days during the week of my period. And it was just when my cramps were really hard, I couldn't go to sleep, and it just relaxed me enough. And I was actually very surprised at how well it worked. I was also nervous about getting up in the morning and making sure that I didn't know.
That you might be, stoned.
Yeah, exactly. That I might be stoned, that I might be we're off, whatever, high, whenever. I didn't know, but
well,
no, I was really...
That would be a kind of difficult combo of stoned and on your period.
I know.
If the period is bad enough, right?
I know, but no, I was really surprised. So, honestly, I feel like I'm hooked. I got a little bag of it, and,
But was there any after effect the next day?
No.
So you got the benefit
Yeah, I
without
got the benefit.
without the side effect.
Nope. Yeah. And so it was just a little gummy. It's a 50 milligram. I think I took a 50 milligram CBD, which, by the way, is the derivative of the marijuana plant that is the relaxation part. The THC is the getting high, part.
But periods obviously are cyclical. I mean, every 30 days plus, right? So going back to the concern about addiction or habit forming, I mean, obviously it was beneficial that one time.
Yeah.
Is this now become part of your routine?
I think it's going to become. I mean, because look, here's the thing for me: whatever's going to work, I'm going to use. And it works. I mean, to me, if the benefit is greater than the risk, which I was concerned about the risk, but at that point I took it, and to me, because I actually experienced it, the risk went down. And honestly, subsequently, I spoke to a lot of my friends. I have a friend of mine who is actually using cannabis. He's a nurse, and he's actually a nurse anesthetist, and he does a lot around cannabis use with his patients. And so there's all of this research that shows that any of these, I mean, I'm specifically talking about cannabis and derivatives of cannabis, that it's more and more being used to support, instead of melatonin, you use this, or for painkillers, you use this, so.
Well, actually, let me bring it from this hyper personal, which you just did now, to actually the policy basis,
Yep.
because as you know, and many of our viewers know, I'm an elected official in the city of Highland Park, and we've had to deal with this.
Oh, really?
Because first of all, if you rewind the tape, before there were any dispensaries, when the first one started popping up, it was that same reaction. What do you mean a dispensary for cannabis, or and then at first it could only be medical, and you had to have a prescription and all that, and now it can be recreational. So throughout the urban centers went quickly on that. The suburban areas less quick, but if you go near our area now, Libertyville here, or Highland Park, or Northbrook, Highwood, you see these dispensaries going up, but they went up at different rates. There was an opportunity early on for a cannabis dispensary to go up in Highland Park, but at the time, those that were in city council, I wasn't part of that at the mix, really were caught in their mixed feelings about it, right? For that had that same reaction. So another neighboring, and all neighboring suburbs are friendly with each other, but they're also competitive, right? Because you're attracting restaurants and retailers, and then here a neighboring city said, well, they raised their hand and they took it, and it turned out to be a very profitable cannabis center, right? Dispensary. And now over time, Highland Park started saying, okay, we can have those, but Highland Park was not a first mover there, so that was one issue, right? It's but you got to deal with a demographics of the city. And you had to say, what do the people want, not want, and all that. And then it got more complicated. So finally there was an acceptance of dispensaries. Okay, fine. And regulations around it, fine, and all that. And then taxes came in with it. And well, that's beneficial for city revenue.
Sure.
So that kind of starts shifting mindsets. But then a smoke shop went up just a block and a half from City Hall. Yeah. And they got it brought up because they were selling products with THC.
Right.
So now it's like, oh, this is a new thing. We've never faced it before, but now we're facing it. And this issue of wellness came up, kind of disrupting the issue of wellness. What is wellness? Because one argument was THC is not regulated.
Right.
And the state of Illinois and many other states is not regulated. And so can we trust product that are not regulated? Is it, if it's packaged in ways that have cartoons on it, might it attract underage people? And so that was one argument, right? Not regulated. Could it be damaging to younger people? But the other one was, it's something that makes people feel better.
And it works.
Right? So you talked about making your period easier. Others talked about, I'm dealing with depression and it works.
Yeah, right.
I have pain, chronic pain, and it works, right?
Sleep issues.
So then the debate, and I'm not going to say, right or wrong, but this is the debate. How much you protect the population, and how much you trust the population to make decisions for themselves as adults. And let me carve out the youth part. You know, like liquor. You know, people. You know, we know you got to be 21, and there's logic for it. But after that, if you have an ID and you're 21, it's your decision. Right. So the argument was, well, yeah, let's protect young people, but let's allow adults to make their own decisions. That's where the debate got stuck, because in the end, the sale of THC in that smoke shop in the rest of the city was banned.
Oh, wow. The smoke shop too?
Well, the smoke shop had to remove its THC products. Okay, got it. But that was their highest, one of their, highest margins. Yeah. So they had to they were grandfathered in for the length of their lease, but they had to stop the sale immediately. So right there, we had to face a big, so when we talk about wellness, right, that was a wellness debate. Because part of wellness is, do we protect the public regulatorily, or do we allow the public to make decisions about what is wellness for them?
Sure. Well, remember, it reminds me of the conversation you and I had. I'm not going to make it political, but the conversation of what is governance? You know, what is the governance over people? Has governance gone too far? Remember, you and I had that conversation recently. Has governance gone too far in general I'll help the people make their own decisions. You know, they don't know any better. I'm going to protect them from themselves. And, it reminds me, of this. But yeah, I mean, but I also think, Andres, this is, I think that there's a lot that has gone through, cannabis at the time, marijuana at the time when you and I were younger, these were the things that we would hide in our cars, and we would roll them up, and we would hide them in cigarette containers. And, it was an illicit drug, and it became this kind of funny thing that you did. And it could become addictive because, quite frankly, it was that whole thing about it was wrong. So but now it's the research shows that there are positive aspects of taking, marijuana, THC and or CBD. And I think that's the thing, is that the research has changed that look at it. So I don't know. Again, for me, I'm going to be really, I think I am a little bit biased going into this conversation because I have two things. Number one, I myself have seen it and used it. And I also have a number of friends who actually, the majority of my friends who use it or use this with their families is with their parents who are having sleeping issues, or their parents who have dementia. Yeah. And it is amazing to me that I think about this illicit thing that we were all hiding, in cars and smoking this, that here are these individuals who have dementia or have whatever, that are now taking this either as gummies or smoking it and getting real medical benefit from this.
Yeah, and I think also one thing that is beyond our expertise, but it should be part of the discussion, is we've talked about cannabis and CBD, and we talk about THC.
Yes, right.
And there is a distinction.
There is, correct.
And it's a spectrum, right? So what was completely forbidden, cannabis, now look at this. Legal cannabis market is going to be $102 billion by 2030, which means, and that is supported by 91% of U.S. adults who support marijuana legalization for medical and recreational use. And that cannabis jobs grew by 428,000 full-time positions, right? So what was illicit and the hiding and all this, suddenly it's out in the market, it's generating economic value, it's generating jobs, and it's helping people, right? So that the overtoned window of what was forbidden now is mainstream.
Well, and let me add to that before you go on, because you're on a really good roll. The other thing too about that, though, Andres, is that the government actually went back and looked at people who were put in jail for having marijuana and paraphernalia around marijuana, and then you get either a misdemeanor or whatever, or you were put into jail. They wiped some of the. I mean, once the research came out, they actually wiped some of those records, so people got out of jail. Hundreds of thousands. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. So there is, and the science has gone in and said, no, this is not dangerous like it was thought to be. Now, there's still other research says it still could be addictive, and there's still concern about that, and there's concern about in terms of making a distinction between young people underage versus adults, right?
Well, and really, this is also an entrance drug. I mean, this still is seen as an entrance drug to other things like heroin and
So there's a caution there. but also a liberalization that's helping a lot of people, right? So we've gone from forbidden to mainstream, and now THC is in the picture, and there's less known about it, and there's other forms of THC and all that, and it's unregulated, and yet it also, there's people that will say and swear by it that is helping them in the same way the cannabis or the CBD version. Well, what's the difference? You know, THC is coming from that same plant, different parts, but now the same resistance to CBD and marijuana face is now faced by THC. So there's now a new arena of debate, and you can see where a city, Highland Park, chose to move the Overton window here, but not here. And now there's microdosing and psychedelics, which actually now opens yet another space of wellness. What have you experienced in terms of friends or knowledge about shrooms and other psychedelics?
Acid for sure. I've not tried anything on the psychedelic side. I do have friends who have tried mostly acid, a little bit of shrooms, and mostly for the exact same reason here. So natural remedies around depression, natural remedies around periods, especially when you have really strong cramps. The general stress and anxiety of this world, and getting a little bit of a trip and getting kind of a little bit out of your head a little bit. But I myself have not experienced that and haven't tried. But yeah, no, I have. The other thing too, Andrés, as we're talking about this, I think one thing that I want everyone to understand too, at least from my vantage point, the people who are trying it are other executives like me, are therapists. I have a behavioral therapist friend, a clinical therapist friend who are using these on a regular basis to either support their own wellness or to just kind of relax on the relaxation side. So they aren't any younger than I am. I'm in my high 40s, and they are using this and regulating themselves, but they're finding these to be very helpful.
Yeah, and now there's formal training for therapists to how to use psychedelics in therapy, right? And there's sort of guidelines around it and things like that. But I also found myself in new conversations with friends who now have been microdosing. And at first it caught me off guard. I was like, really? Because again, it was in that forbidden, and it was and that's even more intense than the cannabis, right?
Agreed.
It's like, okay, I just got used to the cannabis or CBD and maybe THC, and now wait, what? You're microdosing also, and with shrooms, and really you? Yeah. And we know that the pandemic sort of was such a stressful thing, and people were sort of caught in their 2x4 or whatever they were living. And that's we know from the statistics that was an inflection point where that started to grow because people had nowhere else to go. Yeah. And one place to go someplace else and still be in your house was through some psychedelics, right?
Yeah. I think one thing though too, Andrés, that I think about, because, I identify as Filipino, you identify as Peruvian. I know at least for me, and I'd love to hear, from your kind of cultural background and what you've seen either yourself or with your family and friends, the use of psychedelics, at least in the Philippines, has been kind of typical. We are a tribal culture. There are a lot of tribes that have used a variety of things like different tobaccos, different dosages of these things, different fermented fruits and seeds and those kinds of things. And you go into a tent, mostly the men, and you cover yourself. And by using these, they would not call them psychedelics, but we are calling them psychedelics. To go into this other realm, it actually creates this higher level of thinking. And so then they give the tribe answers. So I think that that's really interesting, but that's part of my culture. Do you see that with your or maybe even just your friends and your family? Like, what are your experiences?
Well, it's a combination, right? I also, similar Peruvian culture, particularly Andean culture, where, psychedelic, or a sort of altering, consciousness altering plant, which as you prepare in a certain way, ayahuasca, is ancient, from the time of the Incas. And it has been, but it only has come mainstream into the knowledge, in this culture recently, to the point that I knew about ayahuasca all along, never tried it, and it was always like this thing to be feared way over here. But it's just in the last year and a half, American friends, non-Peruvian, they start just saying ayahuasca. And I wait, what? How do you know about ayahuasca?
Yeah.
You know, oh, I'm reading about it, or I'm going to do it, or I did it, and I went on ayahuasca. And not only were they going to Peru to do ayahuasca things, but now just down the road, I have a friend who they did an ayahuasca ceremony.
What does that look like?
Well, I wasn't at it, yeah, but they had a shaman come in and they did the ayahuasca thing, and I don't know if it's listed or not, but you know, but you're starting to hear about ayahuasca ceremonies, not only where in the original place of Peru, of my country, but also here. But going back to the ayahuasca ceremonies, it's becoming more and more mainstream. And so it speaks to what we're talking about here. And the question is why, right? And people are looking not only to have a high, that's not what I'm hearing so much. I'm hearing it going back to the wellness conversation. People are trying to feel physically better, or to feel emotionally better, or to have a deeper understanding of what's happening inside in ways that traditional talk therapy can't get to.
Yeah. Or, you know, or to fix, you know, things. I mean, we recently, you know, learned, you and I both recently learned that some people take microdosing of psychedelics to break habits, whether it's drinking or biting your nails. I mean, I didn't know that. I didn't know that could do that. So, I mean, I think the other thing too, for some of these things, I mean, I know definitely for cannabis, it's this idea that it's more of it's an herb, it's a plant, you know? I mean, so this concept of plant-based, you know, wellness or sustainability or, you know, or this organicness, you know, I mean, I think that also
vegan,
has,
right?
Yeah, right. I mean, I think it has a lot to do, you know, shrooms. I mean, the ayahuasca, I think it has a lot to do, you know, with that. I mean, it's Mother Nature. It gave it to us, so we're just using it.
I mean, it's a vegan medicine, right? As opposed to synthetic. And again,
like a Tylenol,
I can't help but keep thinking from a policy perspective, you know, if something can make people feel better, or break a habit, or break a habit that is actually making you unwell, like an addiction to X, or, you know, chronic pain, you know, and something can get you out of it. And that something can get you out of it, in theory, I'll just say in theory for now, without the side effects.
Wouldn't you do it?
Wouldn't you do it? And what is the role of policymakers to think,
what's my role in that?
What's my role in it? Or is there a line to be drawn, and why? And this tension between appropriate protection of the public about things we don't yet know, and yet the freedom of adults to make decisions based on what they think is best for them.
So let me ask you, you know, Andrés, so have you ever tried THC, CBD, any of these, you know, things?
Well, on the CBD side, yes. I mean, with the trauma that I went through with the Highland Park shooting, and also with my wife's entering into dementia and the cardiac arrest she had, you know, I was having a hard time sleeping. And sleep is so basic, you know, and I was really, and people would recommend it. And not the THC version, but the CBD version. It's very similar to the recommendation you got. I could relate to that. And I resisted it for quite a while. Because of the stigma, you know, and you know, it's illicit. But I was desperate to sleep, and it ended up being very benign. Very benign. I mean, there was no side effects. There was no addiction, and I slept better. Good. Now, I found that once I was past the traumatic side of things, I didn't need it anymore, and I didn't want to depend on it, right?
But would you use it again?
If I had problems sleeping eventually, because it's a wellness issue, right? If you're not sleeping well, right, then...
it leads to a lot of things.
So that's me, but also going back to my friends who are now gone further. I have a friend who tried shrooms in Mexico because they're not listed here, or they can be listed under very controlled situations. And you know, and I said, "What was the experience like?" And it was a memorable experience. And she's someone that keeps seeking, sort of, to experience. To not be limited by her body to understand reality. And she will talk about how part of the experience was watching her hands just kind of like feel like they're disintegrating. And I thought, well, that sounds really scary, or that sounds really mind altering in a way that what's a productive aspect of it? But when I asked her about it, at least what I picked up from it was that it was very liberating for her to see that her selfness was not self-contained to the physical boundaries of fingers, right, or hands.
Wow.
And that sort of gave her a greater sense of possibilities, which then opened her up to looking back to her emotional realities in new ways, right? And no side effects. And something very moment and a breakthrough moment for her in the several things that she was processing. And that was the first time I had a conversation with someone who was very intellectual, very careful about what she gets herself into or not, very corporate, but also very alternative in some of her practices. So I couldn't just dismiss it as, well, that's a druggie. It was far from that. But if someone had approached me, hey, I'm doing shrooms, before that conversation with someone that I know and respect, and I really admire, I would have not. I couldn't get out of her story. Did not fit my understanding, my paradigm. But so I leaned into it. And I seen it differently now.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. I think the why also, I mean, a lot of the stuff that we read, a lot of the stats, that we've got in front of us talk a lot about, increases after COVID, lots of the stress that you and I talked about, lots of the lack of control. And I think what people are in general are not just the organic nature of it and the what is it called? Sustainability, factor, but also just wanting to self-medicate, but also not to get into a dangerous, space. Like I want to find something that's going to work for me. I don't want to go to my doctor and talk about this. I just need, something. It's interesting too, on the note that you just talked about you and I also both of us getting out of our paradigms about what does the user look like? So there are several great dispensaries here in Libertyville. And I went to one recently as little as 2 weeks ago, to get my gummies. And I went to a new one actually. And so I went there, because the place that I usually get mine from it's actually online. There's an organic farm in Wisconsin that's family owned and I get them shipped here. But there was a dispensary and I went to it. So to your point, if you go to a dispensary, and I would assume that many dispensaries are like this, and you see who's in the room, it was a complete, from here's me, in my little yoga, outfit, with my hair pulled back and the jewelry on, and I come in and I look the way that I do. And then you've got a couple people in suits, coming in and grabbing what they need. You've also got, all types of just like looks and races and ages. And, you've also got a lot of older people, coming in and they're grabbing, what it is that they need. And I think for me, I was like, wow, this is just like a grocery store. Like it was just like, they're just getting, it's like a pharmacy. You're just going in and you're getting what it is that you need. And everybody was very friendly. The service was great. Like I actually remember thinking, wow, this was, I wasn't expecting this.
Well, and it's big business now. Yeah. I mean, Scott's Grow, the people that do the fertilizer and the enhancements for, lawns and stuff, they've gone big time into the weed business. Big time. Like it's a multi-billion-dollar business, right? So the whole thing has been mainstream. It's generating jobs, it's raising, revenue and tax revenue. As these dispensaries have to pay taxes on their sales, like a grocery store does. So but I still believe that there's a lot we don't know. And we can talk about things being overregulated, right? But regulation has always played, when it's done well and not heavy-handed, it has protected the public. And there's a bunch of things that we still don't know about long-term effects of several of these things. And there's distinctions to be made, too, between the more natural vegan, because if they are vegan, sort of interventions, if you will, versus the synthetic ones. Yeah. That really are so potent and so destructive, right? And so I worry that in the opening toward psychedelics or microdosing or shrooms, that in the spirit of letting adults be adults and make decisions for themselves, which philosophically I lean toward, On the other hand, I also believe that, there's a lot of things we don't know yet.
Yeah. And so it should be, regulated. I don't disagree. I mean, you and I both came from research backgrounds. So a lot of my default is like, do you have the research to show it? They opened the doors to THC and cannabis once they started getting more and more research. So I think, we're kind of in that middle space that, well, what does the research, say? So no, I think for me, in terms of my takeaway, is again, I have tried, some of these. I also see a lot of the benefit. And actually, and like I said earlier, what I have actually seen of the people that are trying these things are actually older than myself, and so. And again, maybe this is just my formal nature. I do rely on authority members to say, like, it's okay. So when I see people who are older than me trying this, it triggers in me to say, well, they say it's okay. They were the ones saying that it wasn't okay in the first place, and that I was hiding from. And now you're the ones taking it. Why? Because over time, it has shown that it does, help. So, I think it's so fascinating that even in a very short period of time, because when did I first try marijuana? It was maybe 22 years ago. So it wasn't that long ago that I was hiding and using it. And now it's like, yeah, like we'll just go up to a little, dispensary and press the buttons and it, just kind of comes out. I mean, we could drive there now, so that's what I think is amazing.
Yeah. And I think we're in this in-between space.
Yeah,
right?
We are.
Where there's so many stories of people helped by it that are indisputable. And people, even for things that oneself hasn't done, like I haven't done, but people I respect and admire have done it and come back and reported, right? Not only benefits, but no side effects. And then there's the stories of things going wrong. And that's the part, right, where I'm going, how do we encourage this or enable this, but then really not expose, especially those that are most vulnerable,
Of course.
Obviously underage people, from things that we as a society should have known better.
Well, and I think that's also one of the things too. And, and actually our recent guest, we talked a little bit about this, is that, well, then let's just talk about it. The things that we don't talk about, the things that we don't educate people on, they're going to educate themselves. They're going to find their own research. They're going to find their own ways, to doing things. The guest that you and I that I'm talking about, at least, we talked about, violence against women, this idea of consent, this idea of like when somebody says no or they say stop, that means it. But we didn't talk about that for a very long time. Now we're actually talking about consent. If you can just bring it forward and you can talk about it, then I think that it becomes a conversation that you can just say, oh, well, I thought this, but now we think this, let's just, figure it out. So it's becoming, again, the word is mainstream,
And I think alcohol is a really good paradigm. Mm-hmm. Because alcohol, was was a prohibition, right? Completely illegal.
Yeah.
And now alcohol is everywhere. Including at pickleball courts and stuff like that, or really at the baseball game and stuff like that. But we're aware of that it can be very destructive,
That's right.
right? And there's regulation in terms of underage, and even in certain pickleball courts, for example, there's a limit of how much you can consume, right? The tap gets turned off in the automatic self-dispensing things. So there is a recognition. And then obviously alcoholism is a huge problem,
huge.
right?
It's still huge,
and alcoholism comes from partaking of a legal substance.
Mm-hmm. Right, correct.
That is regulated.
And that is accessible also.
And I think that's a good paradigm to look at. This new field with new mood-enhancing substances.
Yeah, and that we call wellness. We are at least calling it wellness and self-care.
And that sounds kind of disruptive, which is the whole point.
I know. Yeah. No, so let's do our disrupt GPS. On this one, first of all, I enjoyed this conversation. I enjoyed being able to talk about my period. No, but
you went there,
I did go there. But no, for me, I have always been somebody that is comfortable in taking risk. I am comfortable in using, some things at the same time. I am always looking for new ways that I can put something natural into my body to fix this. Now, I am also somebody who's highly self-regulated, so I trust myself entirely, so, but your point around, group regulation, public, regulation and supporting ourselves as a community is a really good, thing. For me, I do feel very comfortable being self-regulated. For me, a big takeaway is, I will say I am thankful that I've tried, what I've tried, because I will say I don't know if I'm ever going to go back to using like a Motrin or a Tylenol or something, like that, because it really does help. The symptoms that I have from during my period, the other synthetics, they didn't work for me, some of the symptoms are debilitating. I mean, they're just debilitating. And when you find something, it's amazing. I would have to stop work for 2 days. I'd have to sleep in my bed for 2 days, and now I don't have to do that. So it is a big deal. It is a health and wellness thing. And for me to be able to have that access, for me to be able to do that and self-regulate that. And again, I only take it probably 2 or 3 times in that time period between 28 days and 28 days. And that's it, But I also acknowledge, like you said, unregulated. I think for me, like you said, Andres, what is the balance between, regulating this, but also allowing people to have access to something that can really, really help them?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And, we each make our personal choices, but how much of our personal choices should be imposed on others, right?
Right, true.
Yeah, and my takeaway sort of in our Disrupt GPS final part here is, I also, like you, feel able to do a lot of self-regulation.
Yeah.
I never have liked to be out of control.
Yeah.
That's why, I like my, old fashions, but, I'm not a heavy drinker, never have been. I just don't like the feeling that I might lose control or just be a little bit more altered than I can manage, right? I never liked that idea. And that translates into why these particular experiences or opportunities to have these experiences have not necessarily appealed to me.
Sure. Yeah, I understand.
But I have to say that when I see people that I respect and admire and are leaning into and having certain kinds of experiences that I had simplistically looked at, oh, that's just getting high, or that's just getting altered for the sake of it, but they're actually finding that it's a breakthrough to a higher level of consciousness understanding. Wow, yeah. That's really intriguing.
That is intriguing. Yeah, because I know I've known you for a while, and you're always looking for ways. I mean, you constantly look for ways, mostly through conversations with others. You sharing yourself, where we're helping you to rethink things. And I mean, you're in groups, where you expose your writing and things, and that helps you to get to a higher level of consciousness and thinking. I mean, obviously this is something different, but yeah, I mean, paradox in a paradigm, you have always been open to thinking differently. What are ways that I can think differently?
Yeah, think differently, but this is about experiencing differently.
Yeah,
which is,
yeah.
And as a Peruvian, I'm like, wow, to think that something like ayahuasca sort of becomes mainstream. It's not different than how I grew up with quinoa.
Oh yeah.
And the Incas, that Peru is the origin of quinoa. And I remember about 10 years ago, quinoa was everywhere. Not only in your bowls, but it was in your soap and in your lotions.
Everywhere. And it's such a big deal.
How did this happen, right?
Isn't that funny?
So anyway, now we brought quinoa to the world. Yeah. And we actually brought the potato to the world, the tomato, the sweet potato, the yuca, and also ayahuasca, which is an interesting repertoire.
Yeah, I know.
Of natural ingredients
that came from here.
And now that have been mainstream all over the world.
I know. Yeah. I know. No, I love it. I love it. Well, thanks for joining us for this conversation. You know that you can find Andres on all of his platforms. Find me on all of ours. Please do comment and let us know what you thought. And have you used psychedelics? Are you mind altering? Are you using something for your period? I'd love to know. So please comment, follow, and subscribe. We do need you to hit that subscribe button. Okay, so do it. But thank you so much for being with us today. Thanks for having this great conversation. Don't get high, but if you do, be careful.
Okay.
Bye.
Ciao.